exhibit behavior in the face of problems and frustrations do so because they lack the skills not to. This is a skills deficit situation. And a lot of traditional parenting techniques talk about it as being a motivation deficit situation. We don't believe that at all. In fact, Dr. Greene, myself, and our colleagues, we've worked with hundreds of thousands of kids and families at this point. We haven't met the kid who has all the skills they need, all these high level thinking skills, and they just choose not to use them, just not motivated to pull them out. I don't know that kid.
Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child Podcast. Now, you've probably heard me say before, traditional parenting just doesn't work for our kids that have these challenges. Why do kids exhibit challenging behaviors in the face of problems? Why do some exhibit that and some don't? How come consequences don't work? What can parents do instead? And one of my favorite quotes that, if you've been listening to me for a while, I do say a lot, kids do well if they can. And this is definitely one of my favorite quotes when it comes to understanding our challenging kids. And that's why I'm so excited to welcome my guest to today's episode. You're going to have to pull out your notepads. You're going to have to pull out your pens because this is going to be full of gold. Now, Kim Hopkins is an independently licensed clinical social worker who has specialized in working with behavioral challenged kids for more than 25 years. That is a lot of experience. She has managed the clinical departments of 2 organizations serving youth and families in residential facilities, foster homes, therapeutic day schools, and homeless shelters. She has been a collaborative and proactive solutions, which is CPS for short, trainer since 2007, helping schools, residentials, hospitals, parents to successfully implement the CPS model from Dr. Ross Greene. Now, Ms. Hopkins is also the Director of Outreach and Communication for Dr. Ross Greene's nonprofit Lives in the Balance. So now it's time to welcome Kim Hopkins to the Soaring Child. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And that 25 years thing hits a little hard. And I kind of go, how is that possible if I'm only 29?
I think that's hilarious because I say to myself all the time, I really still feel like I'm 13. Mm-hmm. My son, I speak a lot on stage, and my son is who I talk about a lot. He was diagnosed when he was 4, and I show a photo of him. You could probably see him for those that are watching in a photo frame behind me. But I say, I would like you to introduce you to my son. He's 13. I still feel 13. I'm mid-40s and I still feel 13. So I totally understand exactly what you mean. Thank you so much for joining us. I was really grateful when you said that you wanted to be a guest on our podcast. And I am sure that you can share so much information and just your expertise with our listeners. And so let's dive in. When I opened up this episode, I sort of was talking about, some kids do exhibit challenges, challenging behavior in the face of problems. And so why is that the case?
Well, what 60 years of research at this point has told us, and granted that research has been slow to make it into mainstream, but it is happening, which is a great thing to see, is that kids who exhibit behavior in the face of problems and frustrations do so because they lack the skills not to. This is a skills deficit situation. And a lot of traditional parenting techniques talk about it as being a motivation deficit situation. We don't believe that at all. In fact, Dr. Greene, myself, and our colleagues, we've worked with hundreds of thousands of kids and families at this point. We haven't met the kid who has all the skills they need, all these high level thinking skills, and they just choose not to use them, just not motivated to pull them out. I don't know that kid. even some kids might be very good at trying to convince us that they're not motivated. Don't buy it. It isn't true. Because they suffer even more than we all do when they do
Mm-hmm.
behavior, right? So, they have a lot of reasons for doing well. They just don't have what they need to pull off doing well in terms of skills.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. I always sort of say, like, our kids' brains are under construction, and I think most kids don't have the skills. Some might be able to have slightly better skills than other skills. And I can tell you, I've got two kids. One's got ADHD, one doesn't. And my little one who doesn't have ADHD is sometimes just as challenging as my older one who does have ADHD. So, I definitely can see that they just don't have those skills yet. Or they have lesser skills than some of their peers. So, we were all taught when we grew up that when you didn't do well, you had a consequence for that. And that's how I was parented when don't tell anyone, but I took my mum's little glass crystal animals and I took them to school in my school bag and for show and tell. And when I got home, they were all smashed in the bottom of my bag. I was punished. I was grounded for 2 weeks. But, how come consequences don't work? And, what is an alternative to that? What should parents be using instead of those consequences?
Yeah, well, it turns out that consequences just teach kids what we like and what we don't like. But we can do that without consequences, right?
Mhm.
And my guess is that when you put the little glass animals in your backpack, you knew you weren't supposed to, but you did it anyway, right?
Mhm.
So we're sort of wasting our breath if we just gave a consequence because you already knew you weren't supposed to.
Yep.
Right. And then we're missing out on the opportunity to understand if you knew you weren't supposed to, how did it happen? Right. And understand how your brain was working in that situation so that we could help you next time. We're missing out all on that opportunity. So they don't get the job done because they're not doing anything to address skills. And they're just rehashing what kids already know. What you did,
Mm.
we didn't like, but they already knew that. So it's not
Mhm.
really doing anything, and this goes for kids who don't lack skills too. You know,
Yes.
um, and, to use myself as an example, one skill that I struggled with as a kid was handling it when the plan changed. I was a pretty rigid thinker. My
Mhm.
parents would read it as the opposite of what we're talking about. Kids do well if they wanna. Like,
Yes.
well, she just must not wanna do well. She just must want her own way kind of thing, and that's why she's crying and whatever. So we need to consequence her. When it was that I couldn't handle that the plan changed, and then I
Mhm.
became an adult, now I'm in charge of the clinical programming for 12 programs, right? This is back in my early career, and the plan changed on me all the time, and now I was lucky with my behavior signal. I mean, I'm not hurting people over it because
Mhm.
that's a matter of luck. I was more like feeling anxious and being snippy and not having patience, but that didn't go well. That didn't go over well, right? But they missed that I had a hard time when the plan changed. So thankfully, I found this model and was able to give myself a strategy because the plan changes on me all the time. And I
Yes.
can't afford to feel anxious and upset about it and act out about it. I need to be able to handle it. Right. And consequence, they don't teach anything. They just teach what you did we didn't like, which I already knew.
Yes. Yeah.
you
So
know?
what would a family do? In that situation, I know that there are a lot of kids, especially with ADHD, they are a creature of habit. They thrive on routine. And so what happens? What would a parent do if the plan change and their kids don't like it?
Well, to back up a little bit, the very first thing is to really get a good list going of all the examples, all the times you've seen when your child ends up displaying behavior. When is this happening? The skills they might lack, and then when does this all play out? Because you want to get proactive. The best time
Mm.
to essentially we're giving kids experience in skills training and in gaining skills in problem solving, right? So the best time to do that is not when they're doing behavior. They're not
Mhm.
really fully available, and maybe neither are we. We're not at our best at that time either. So we really do want a nice complete kind of a list of examples of when this plays out. Oh, it's when I ask him to take the trash out on Tuesdays. It's when I say time to end the computer to come to dinner. It's not being able to get up to bed at 8 p.m. Like, what are the expectations you have that are regularly not being met? Well, let's get that list, because that's going to help us be proactive, and it's going to help us decide, what are we going to work on? What are our high priorities? And then what are we not going to work on? And for those, we need to find a way to put those on ice to make room to get our high priorities going better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, if your high priority is an unsolved problem, maybe around, I'll take one for my own life, difficulty, um, uh, how would I word it? Because it was about shifting from, so if we were supposed to go bowling, right, on Saturday, and Saturday came, my parents said, oh, we're going to the movies instead. I actually liked the movies better, but I would have a hard time with that.
Mm.
So you would want to talk about it when you're not in the middle of demanding that shift happen, right? And talk about it, how it was hard, when we switched the plan, right? So, um, difficulty, you could say, coming to the movies with the family or something like that. What was hard about that? And you're really trying to understand how your child thought about the situation, which, by the way, you can't observe. You can observe their feelings, you can observe their behavior, but it's their thought process that, if you had a little glance into, would really actually position you to better help them, because they didn't have what they needed to solve that problem. You want to get some insight into what the problem actually is, and then you can help them figure out how to handle that situation differently going forward, a similar situation differently going forward. And doing that, and there's 3 steps to this problem-solving process. Giving those doses of those 3 steps over and over again is giving them lots of experience in problem
Mm-hmm.
solving, which is gonna enhance the very skills that are at the root of this thing without us even having to think about it, which is very nice. We're solving problems. We're just enhancing skills as part of it, not even having to focus on that, which is nice.
Yeah, and so you can do it, prior to it happening. So I suppose it's going to take a little bit of work, for the parents to sort of really understand when their child has a hard time and what that actually means, and then proactively talking about it with them prior to it happening again. So, what will happen? What do you suggest? I know that we on the podcast we've talked a lot about, what do we do in the moment? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. When there is a full-blown meltdown and you didn't realize this was going to cause, the change in plan was going to cause the crying, was going to cause the tantrum. What are your thoughts on how, that should be handled?
Yeah, well, you always have 3 options for handling an unmet expectation,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which results in behavior, right? So you could go with the traditional thing, which runs the risk of making it worse, and also the relationship takes a hit. If
Yes.
you said something like, "Stop acting like that, knock it off," right? That just runs the risk of making things worse. If you don't stop, you'll be going to your room. We're making things worse, we're not getting information, we're disconnecting from our kids,
Yep.
and we're not doing any skills teaching. In the heat of the moment, we're not doing much skills teaching anyway, but we're definitely not doing any skills teaching.
Yeah.
You could I mean, you would do have another, so we call these plans, that's plan A. You do have plan C, where you sort of don't do anything about it. You sort of table your expectation. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. In an emergency heat of the moment situation, sometimes we're worried that if we plan C it, it's just gonna make it worse, and it might, right? So it might not be the option, but that is in there, right? You can also do plan B, which is synonymous with the collaborative and proactive solutions model. You can
Mm-hmm.
use our model in the heat of the moment. It's, again, 3 steps. If I'm doing emergency, this is emergency application of plan B, heat of the moment. I'm not necessarily expecting the 3 steps to go smoothly. But what I'm hoping is that one of the key ingredients of the first step, which is empathy, will in and of itself help get the kid back to baseline. So if I were doing emergency plan B on a situation, I would say, you seem to be having a really hard time right now with our change in plan to go to the movies. Fill me in. Nobody's mad. Nobody's upset. Just, let me know. I can't help you if I don't understand. Right. So help me understand. Right. And now, kids who might not have a great grasp on language, we can be doing this through pictures. We can be doing this through sign language, some nonverbal stuff. I mean, if you think about it, we actually do this with infants who don't have any language at all. We're like, what's going on? You seem upset. What could it be? And then we try different things, and then we use the nonverbal cues to know if we're right or not, right? So, similar thinking, really, that we're trying to connect. If we can get information, great. We can't always, because they're just trying to survive in that moment, right? Their rational thought is diminished. But pouring on empathy, that we're here, we'd love to understand when they're ready, that no one's upset, you're not in trouble, we're not saying you have to, right? Sort of taking all that out of the mix can really just help bring a kid back to baseline, which is what you're hoping for in that moment. The durable, problem solving skills teaching piece happens really only proactively, but it is an effective tool to get kids back to baseline. Although we like to say nothing good happens in the heat of the moment. So our whole thing is, let's avoid you even getting there. Let's use our assessment to help figure out lagging skills, unsolved problems, make the kid predictable, use proactive plan B for your high priorities, proactive C for the things you're not working on. Then you won't end up in the heat of the moment, which is the really nice thing.
So you talk about, you've got plan C is do nothing, just let it be. Am I right?
Yep. And sometimes you can't just do nothing. So sometimes you need like an agreed upon interim Band-Aid plan. But yeah.
Okay.
How are you going to set the problem aside for now?
Yes. And plan B, okay, I'm just trying to sort of lay it all out for our listeners in a sort of a small, succinct way so they can really understand it and apply it at home. So plan A is the traditional approach, from what I heard.
It is when the adult solves the problem unilaterally. The adult decides how it's going to go.
Yep. And then plan B is this alternative approach to proactively teach the skills that they need. But if you're in the heat of the moment, go forward with, firstly, empathy.
I would. Yeah. And that's the name of the first step of plan B, is the empathy step. In proactive plan B, you're really more focused on gathering information. Empathy is nice to have in the mix. But in emergency plan B, I think empathy is really key in order to help bring the kid back to baseline.
Okay, so we've got step 1 in emergency plan B as being empathy. What's step 2 and 3?
And they're the same 3 steps, whether it's emergency or proactive. But step 1 is where you have the empathy step, where you gather information from the kid, who we view as our partner in this collaborative process. Step 2 is the define adult concern step. That's where you, in a pretty succinct way, talk about your worry. What's your worry when this expectation goes unmet? Usually we're worried about things like health, safety, learning, maybe something like that. And then step 3 is the invitation step, where we're going to invite the kid to consider possible solutions with us that address what they told us in the first step and what we said in the second step. A good solution meets 2 criteria. It's got to be realistic. We think we can do it. And it's got to be mutually satisfactory, meaning that it meets both sets of concerns.
Okay. And so I can predict, and probably not a very good mind reader, but in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this sounds really, really good. It gives you that step-by-step approach that you need to be able to really understand your child, where they're coming from, and help them learn how to problem solve, learn how to deal with real life situations. How long would something like this start to become natural? Because we know, like, obviously anything, when we're bringing in new strategies, it's hard. It really is. It's the same with what I teach. Changing diet is hard. It's not your normal. And so, how long does it take to sort of like get into the groove of things? How long does it take to start seeing change? And I know that this is probably like, well, it's different for everyone, because it's the same. It's what I say. So, from your perspective, what are the how long does this sort of take to bring into your family life?
Sure. I think the biggest indicator of how long it will take is, where are you starting from? I wasn't trained this way. So when I learned the model, I was starting way over in the kids do well if they wanna realm.
Yes.
So if you're like me, it might take you a little bit to really kind of get those kids do if they can lenses on and to have them stay on even when things get hard, right? So you're right, it does depend, but I think that's the major indicator. Once that is kind of part of just how you think about things, right? Then the 3 steps of talking with your child, yeah, they take some practice, no doubt about it. I had somebody once say, it's so simple on paper, it's 3 steps, but when you try to have it come out of your mouth, it's a little tough. We do have a bunch of free resources to help that go better. Um, I think that it all starts with the ALSUP, and that can be done, early days, right? And then we can start, figuring out what we're going to problem solve. And even if you're not doing plan B perfectly, it's much better than plan A and you'll get there. Just try it. Just keep trying it. Learn from mistakes and use our resources to help fine tune things if you like, and you'll get there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good strategy. And I know back in the day when I was really struggling with my son's ADHD symptoms, I tried so many different parenting techniques and positive parenting and this, and just changing from that. Again, I was in the plan A. I was doing exactly what probably most of our generation were taught to do by their parents. This is how we parent. Kids should just do what we say, and there's nothing else to it. But the way that I got into the mindset and the habit of actually talking this way was overdoing it. And so really training myself to always come out with a positive or always come out in a different way. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And now it's second nature to me. It's not, I go forward with trying to help my children from a point of, if they're in the meltdown, I do go from that point of empathy and really sort of say to them, I'm here. I understand. It's tough. It really is. And it's hard. And, I can see how that would be hard for you in the moment when we said we were going ice skating, but now we're going to the movies. And so at first, that was really foreign and it was really hard. But it does get easier, just like with anything. When you change your new normal, it will eventually become your normal and it will become easy. So, Kim, you've shared a lot. I'm curious, for listeners thinking about, okay, well, I want to get started using this CPS model. Where do they begin with it?
Well, Dr. Greene started the nonprofit Lives in the Balance with 2 goals, one of which is to give his model away for free. So if you go to the Lives in the Balance website, which is livesinthebalance.org, under the Our Solution tab, you can go right down to parents and families, and that will be a whole bunch of resources just for your audience, and you'll find the model in video format, downloadable stuff, audio format. We have a monthly podcast you can call into or email into. Big presence on social media, particularly in Facebook. There's a almost 100,000 member group of families, so you don't feel alone when you're in there, who are looking to implement this model as being the primary way they parent. So that we tried to put together lots of resources to help. There's also 2 different books that Dr. Greene wrote for parents, if you prefer that. There's The Explosive Child, and there's Raising Human Beings. So lots of places to turn to for support. There's also practitioners who are certified in the model that are listed on a different website. That's cpsconnection.com. Or you can always use the connect form on the Lives in the Balance website and ask us where to find different things. We're happy to point you there. But we understand that it can be quite a shift for many people. So we try to put together resources to make it a bit easier if we can.
Fantastic. And that's amazing that he, offers this nonprofit and to really help families out there that are struggling and don't have the means to go and see a counselor and so I think that's wonderful. I'm curious, how did you get started using it?
So I was working in residential care, and this is before I became a parent, and we were noticing a few things. We were noticing that we were restraining kids a lot. These were 12 to 22-year-olds. We were holding them on the ground a lot. my nose had gotten broken in a restraint. My
gosh.
ribs had been bruised in a restraint. So we were thinking about, gee, this doesn't seem to be a very therapeutic thing. We need to reduce reliance on this. We also noticed that kids, we had different levels of care, and kids who would go from like a more restrictive setting to a less restrictive setting with less adults around often lost the gains they made because it was all based on external control that didn't follow them, right? And then, our contract holder wanted providers to do something different. They wanted an evidence-based portable treatment model, portable meaning that it worked with not just when there's lots of adults around in a residential program, but like parents could do it, teachers could do it, paraprofessionals could do it. And then we were grappling with all this, and then I just had somebody recommend going to hear Dr. Greene speak for credits for my license, and I didn't realize I was going to find the answer to everything we were grappling with, but I did, and it was just sort of serendipity, and I'm very grateful every day.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is amazing. Being in that, I mean, I could just feel that that scenario of you being in that residential care, and I some of the things that he shares and the quotes and sayings that he shares, I use them a lot, and I think what he's doing amazing, and I think what you're doing is amazing for him as well, and I really appreciate you sharing this. If you could give one tip to parents listening into today's podcast, what would that be?
Would be tune out the noise of all the pressure that people are putting on you. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you dropping that expectation? Why are you letting your kid do this? Why are you letting your kid do that? You know your child. You have to have realistic expectations for your child. And if your child has 30 expectations they can't meet, you can't pursue them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So pursue 1 or 2 or 3 at a time, but you can't pursue them all at once. And a lot of people will question what you're doing. And I say, tune out the noise. You know what you're doing, and find a community that thinks the same way so you don't feel alone.
Yes, definitely. 100%. I love that. I say a lot, you are the expert in your child. And so I love that. Tune out the noise. I haven't heard that being said that way. And I think it's wonderful. Tune out all that noise. You are the expert in your child. Well, thank you, Kim, so much for joining us today, sharing your knowledge and your experience with all of our listeners. You've shared where listeners can find you and follow you online. We will pop them in the show notes for all of those resources that listeners can find and follow you. But thank you again for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome, listeners. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.